The alien spaceport on Regara 7 was always noisy, but today it was even louder. Ships came and went in quick bursts, engines roaring, traders shouting, and the smell of exotic food drifting in the air. The giant glass dome above showed the stars, and the dusty orange clouds of the planet's atmosphere. Jaren walked through the crowd, his human boots making a soft thump on the metal floor. He was not here for trade or sightseeing. He was here for the trial of blades. Humans were rare on Regara 7. Most of the people here were tall, scaled, or covered in fur. Jaren stood out, shorter than most, with dark hair, sharp brown eyes, and a calm expression. He wore a simple travel jacket over light combat armor with a sword strapped to his hip. The sword was not special to look at, just plain steel but sharp and well-balanced. The trial of blades was an old tradition among the Rigorans. It was not just about strength, it was a way for warriors to prove themselves in front of the public. Aliens from many worlds came to try their luck, but few outsiders ever won. When Jaren reached the registration hall, he saw his opponent already waiting. She was a tall alien woman with emerald green skin, golden eyes, and armor made of shining black plates. She had two curved swords strapped to her back and a confident smirk on her face. This was Sirala, one of the best fighters in the city. "So, you're the human challenger," Sirala said, her voice smooth but full of amusement. She looked Jaren up and down like she was sizing up a small animal. "I hope the bulge between your legs isn't the same size as your sword." Several aliens nearby laughed loudly at the joke. Jaren didn't react. He just smiled politely. "I guess we'll see whose blade is sharper." Sirala tilted her head, curious at his calmness. Most warriors would have snapped back with anger, but this human didn't seem bothered. The announcer, a small insect-like alien with a buzzing voice, stepped forward. "Trial of blades begins in 1 hour. All challengers report to the arena." Sirala leaned closer to Jaren, her golden eyes gleaming. "I'll try to make it quick. I wouldn't want to embarrass your kind too much." Jaren shrugged. "I've been embarrassed before. It's not fatal." The arena was carved into the ground, its walls high and smooth. Thousands of spectators filled the stands, shouting and waving flags. The air smelled of oil, dust, and excitement. Jaren stood at one side of the sandy floor, while Sirala stood on the other. The announcer's voice echoed through the arena. "Today's first match, Sirala of the Emerald Blades versus Jaren of Earth." The crowd roared. Many shouted Sirala's name, betting she would win quickly. Hardly anyone was cheering for the human. A loud gong rang. The fight began. Sirala moved first, fast as lightning, her curved swords flashing in the sunlight. Jaren didn't block. He sidestepped, letting her strike cut through the air. He wasn't going to match her strength. She was stronger and had longer reach. Instead, he waited for small openings, testing her movement. He noticed she swung with power but often overcommitted, leaving her side unguarded. The crowd booed when Jaren kept dodging instead of attacking. They wanted blood. Sirala smirked. "Running already?" "I'm learning," Jaren replied. For the next few minutes, Jaren kept moving, using the sand and broken stones to his advantage. He forced Sirala to keep turning, wearing her down. She was fast, but speed cost energy. Finally, he struck, aiming not for her body but for her weapon. His sword hit the edge of hers, twisting it slightly. She stepped back, surprised. "Lucky strike," she said. Jaren smiled faintly. "We'll see." They traded blows now, steel clashing, sparks flying. Jaren's arms shook from the force of her attacks, but he stayed calm. His timing was good, his footwork better. Sirala's confidence started to fade. This human wasn't just surviving, he was adapting. The crowd began to notice, too. Some aliens who had been shouting insults earlier were now leaning forward, watching closely. Sirala made a strong lunge, aiming for Jaren's chest. He twisted to the side and let her sword slide past, then used his elbow to push her off balance. The movement was small, but enough to make her stumble. Gasps came from the stands. Sarala growled in frustration. "You're not bad, human, but let's end this." She charged again, both swords swinging in a blur. Jaren's eyes narrowed. This was the opening he'd been waiting for. Instead of backing away, he stepped in close. Too close for her long. Swings to work. He caught one sword on his own blade and slammed his shoulder into her chest. She staggered backward, her other sword dropping into the sand. The crowd exploded with noise. Jaren pointed his sword at her. "Yield?" Sarala's eyes blazed. She picked up her fallen weapon, but after a long pause, she lowered it. "Not bad, human. Not bad at all." The announcer's voice rang out. "Victory, Jaren of Earth!" The crowd was in shock. A human had beaten one of the city's best fighters in the first round. As they left the arena, Sarala walked beside him. "I underestimated you," she admitted. "You fight like someone who's already lost before. That makes you dangerous." Jaren gave a small smile. "Loss teaches more than victory." Sarala studied him for a moment, then said, "There's another round tomorrow. I hope you're ready for real competition." "I'll be here," Jaren replied. But deep down, he knew the next fight wouldn't be just about the trial. Something in the air felt tense, like trouble was coming, and it wasn't just from the arena. The next morning, the arena buzzed with fresh excitement. The stands were already filling up, and alien merchants were selling snacks, drinks, and souvenirs with Sarala's face printed on them. Jaren noticed that there were no souvenirs with his own face. That was fine. He wasn't here for fame. He was here to prove something. He arrived early, walking across the sandy arena floor while the workers raked and leveled the ground. The dome above shimmered in the morning light, and the cool air carried the sound of the crowd outside. Sarala was already there, stretching her arms and rolling her shoulders. When she saw him, her lips curved into a small smile. "Back for more?" she asked. "Round 2, Jaren replied calmly. "I hear today's challenge is different." She nodded. "Yes. Yesterday was a duel. Today it's survival." A horn sounded from the announcer's platform. The insect-like announcer's voice rang out. "Warriors, today you face the Circle of Steel. 10 opponents enter, only 1 leaves standing." The gates around the arena opened, and fighters from many species walked in. There was a massive 4-armed beast with tusks, a slim insectoid with twin blades, 2 reptilian twins with long spears, and others with weapons Jaren had never seen before. Sarala leaned close and said, "Try not to die too quickly." "I'll do my best," Jaren said. The gong rang. The battle began. Chaos exploded instantly. The 4-armed beast charged at the reptilian twins, swinging 2 axes while blocking with a shield in its lower hands. The insectoid leapt high, trying to slash at a tall warrior with a curved halberd. Sarala moved like a shadow, weaving between fighters and striking with precision. Jaren didn't rush into the center. Instead, he kept moving along the edges, watching, learning. The others were stronger and larger, but they were focused on quick kills. They didn't think about endurance. 2 fighters noticed him and charged. The first swung a heavy hammer. Jaren ducked, letting it smash into the sand. The second tried to stab him, but Jaren sidestepped and slashed at the weapon's shaft, making it useless. A quick kick sent the alien stumbling. The crowd started shouting his name now, just a little. Minutes passed. The fight grew more desperate. 4 fighters were already down, lying in the sand or limping to the edge. Jaren found himself back-to-back with Sarala for a brief moment. "You're still alive?" she said, sounding almost surprised. "Likewise," Jaren replied. They fought, in rhythm, her curved blades striking fast, his sword parrying and countering. Together they dropped another opponent, forcing the rest to step back. But then the horn sounded again, this time deeper and slower. The gates opened once more. From the shadows stepped a huge armored warrior with a war spear taller than Jaren. The crowd roared with excitement and fear. Sarala's eyes narrowed. "That's not part of the standard trial." "Looks like the rules changed," Jaren said. The giant warrior charged. Every step shook the sand. His spear moved like lightning, stabbing at anyone within reach. Two fighters tried to stop him and were knocked aside in seconds. Jaren knew he couldn't block that kind of power directly. He ran to the side, forcing the giant to turn and chase him. Sarala used the moment to slash at the warrior's back, but the armor was too thick. Jaren's mind worked fast. The giant's strength was in his reach, but his weapon was long and heavy. If Jaren could get inside that range, the advantage would vanish. He waited, watching the spear's movements. When the tip came sweeping toward him, he dropped to one knee and slid under it, sand spraying around him. He came up right beside the giant and slammed his sword at the warrior's leg joint. The armor cracked slightly. The giant roared in pain. Sarala struck the same spot, widening the damage. The giant stumbled, his balance breaking. Jaren and Sarala pressed the attack together, striking low, forcing the massive opponent to retreat. Finally, the giant fell to one knee, his weapon dropping into the sand. The crowd went wild. When the dust settled, only 3 fighters remained: Sarala, Jaren, and the insectoid warrior. The insectoid hissed, pointing both blades at them. "I will not lose to an outsider." Sarala glanced at Jaren. "Temporary truce?" He nodded. The insectoid moved with blinding speed, attacking from 2 angles at once. Jaren blocked one strike while Sarala parried the other. They circled, keeping the insectoid trapped between them. Jaren faked a stumble, drawing the insectoid in. At the last second, he pivoted, opening the alien's guard. Sarala's blade flashed, and the insectoid's weapon flew from its claws. The horn blew. Victory. Sarala of the Emerald Blades and Jaren of Earth. The crowd was louder than yesterday. Many aliens who had mocked Jaren before were now cheering. For him, he had survived the Circle of Steel and done it without brute strength. As they left the arena, Sarala glanced at him. "You fight differently from everyone here. You watch, you wait, and then you strike when it matters." "Humans call it patience," Jaren said. She smirked. "Maybe I misjudged you. Still, tomorrow's trial will be harder, and something tells me the arena isn't the only place you'll need to fight." "What do you mean?" Jaren asked. She looked toward the sky, where dark shapes moved near the dome. "Because I think trouble is coming to Rygara 7, and it won't care about our tournament." The next day, the spaceport felt different. The usual noise of merchants and travelers was still there, but there was an edge to it. Whispers spread through the market, and armed guards were posted in more places than usual. Jaren noticed it as soon as he stepped out of his quarters. The air smelled faintly of smoke, even though there had been no fires inside the city. Sarala was waiting for him outside the arena gates. She wore the same black armor as before, but her expression was more serious than usual. "You see it too," she said. "I see nervous people," Jaren replied. "What's going on?" She looked around before answering. "Word is, a rogue faction from the outer sectors is planning to hit Rygara 7. Smugglers, mercenaries, raiders, people who don't care about rules or trials." Jaren glanced up at the sky. "You think they'll attack during the tournament?" "That's the smart move," Sarala said grimly. "Everyone's distracted. The guards are busy with the crowds. Easy prey." The announcer's voice called for the fighters to gather in the arena. But even the announcer sounded tense, like he was forcing cheer into his tone. Today's challenge was announced as the Labyrinth of Blades, a large maze built inside the arena, filled with obstacles, traps, and hidden opponents. The goal was simple: find the exit before anyone else. The gates opened, and the contestants stepped inside. The maze walls were made of tall, thick metal panels with narrow corridors twisting in all directions. Above, the dome let in bright sunlight, but inside the maze, the shadows were deep. Sarala glanced at Jaren. "This isn't a fight. It's a hunt. Keep your eyes open." "Same to you," he replied. They split up at the first fork. The air. Inside the maze was cooler, but it carried strange echoes. Footsteps, clashing metal, and sometimes sharp cries. Jaren moved carefully, keeping his sword ready. He avoided open corridors, preferring to slip between shadows. Twice he heard other fighters fighting each other and chose to go around instead of joining in. At one corner, he spotted movement. It wasn't one of the contestants. It was a figure, in dull gray armor with no tournament markings. The stranger carried a compact blaster, not a blade. That was against the rules. Jaren pressed his back to the wall and watched. The gray-armored figure wasn't moving toward the center of the maze. He was planting something on the wall, a small device with blinking red lights, explosives. Before Jaren could call out, the figure turned and spotted him. The stranger raised the blaster and fired. Jaren ducked, the energy shot burning into the wall behind him. He sprinted forward, closing the distance before the stranger could fire again. With one quick swing, Jaren knocked the blaster from his hands. A second swing sent the armored intruder sprawling, but before Jaren could finish, the man pulled a small control pad from his belt and pressed a button. Somewhere deeper in the maze, an explosion rumbled. Dust fell from above. Sarala appeared from another corridor, her swords ready. That sound wasn't part of the trial. "No," Jaren said. He pointed at the intruder. "This one's not a contestant, and he's planting charges." She glanced at the blinking device on the wall. "Raiders!" she said bitterly. Another explosion shook the maze, this one closer. The walls trembled, and part of the ceiling cracked. Screams echoed from somewhere to the left. "We need to get everyone out," Jaren said. Sarala frowned. "The officials won't listen. They'll think it's part of the show." "Then we don't waste time convincing them," Jaren said. "We find the raiders and stop them." They moved together now, no longer opponents. Sarala led with her speed, cutting down two more gray-armored intruders who tried to ambush them. Jaren handled the heavier fighters, using precise strikes to disarm and disable. As they pushed deeper, they found more of the blinking red devices stuck to the walls. Jaren recognized the pattern. They were placed to collapse the maze completely. "They're trying to trap the contestants," he said. Sarala's eyes narrowed. "And kill them." Near the center of the maze, they found the leader. He was larger than the others, wearing heavier armor painted with jagged black stripes. He carried both a blaster rifle and a massive serrated blade. "You two aren't supposed to be here," the leader growled. "This was going to be clean, quick." "Not anymore," Jaren said. The leader swung his blade at Jaren, who barely dodged in time. Sarala went for the rifle, forcing the leader to drop it. The fight became a brutal, close-quarters struggle, Jaren blocking heavy strikes while Sarala slashed at any opening. Finally, Jaren feinted left, then brought his sword upward, knocking the leader's weapon from his hand. Sarala stepped in and pressed her blade to his throat. "Call off your people," she demanded. The leader spat on the sand. "Too late!" Another explosion shook the ground, this one massive. The three of them staggered as part of the maze wall, toppled nearby. Sunlight poured in through a fresh hole in the dome. In the distance, outside the arena, black smoke began to rise over the city. "They're attacking the spaceport," Sarala said sharply. Jaren looked at the leader. "You're going to help us stop them." The leader laughed. "You think I'd help you?" Jaren's tone was flat. "If you don't, I leave you here when the rest of your explosives go off." For a moment, the leader hesitated, then slowly nodded. The three of them moved quickly, using the leader's knowledge of the raider plan to find the remaining charges and disable them. But the damage was already done. The tournament was ruined, and outside the arena, chaos was spreading. When they finally emerged from the maze, the crowd was in panic, rushing toward the exits. Alarms blared across the spaceport. Sarala turned to Jaren. Looks like our little competition is over. Not yet, Jaren said. If the raiders are attacking the city, we're going to meet them head-on. Sarala gave a short, fierce smile. Then I fight with you. And for the first time since they met, there was no mockery in her voice, only trust. Outside the arena, Rigara-7 looked like a different world. The peaceful spaceport was gone. Now the sky was filled with black smoke and the sound of explosions. People ran in every direction, carrying children, pulling carts, or just trying to escape with their lives. The air burned with the smell of fire and scorched metal. In the distance, a tall fuel tower was engulfed in flames, sending up a thick pillar of smoke. Jaren and Sarala stood at the edge of the chaos. Behind them, the captured raider leader was bound with cable, glowering silently. Sarala pointed toward the main market square. That's where the fighting's heaviest. If the raiders take the square, they'll control the whole port. Jaren adjusted his grip on his sword. Then we don't let them. They moved fast, weaving through panicked crowds. Several times, stray blaster bolts struck near them, forcing them to duck behind walls and broken stalls. The sound of weapons was constant, sharp cracks from blasters, the hiss of energy rifles, the clang of melee weapons. When they reached the square, the scene was grim. The market stalls were overturned, their goods scattered. Fires burned along the edges, casting flickering light across the cobblestones. Raiders in gray armor pushed through the streets, forcing the defenders back. Jaren saw that the defenders weren't soldiers. They were merchants, dock workers, and a few city guards, trying to hold the line. They were brave, but untrained. Sarala gritted her teeth. They won't last. Jaren's eyes scanned the square quickly. He spotted a pile of metal crates stacked near a fuel pump. We can use those crates as cover. Push the line forward. They slipped into the fight without hesitation. Sarala's twin blades cut through two raiders before they even saw her coming. Jaren stayed low, using the crates for protection, striking only when the enemy exposed themselves. "Human on the left!" a raider shouted, firing toward him. Jaren ducked, letting the bolt smash into the crate above his head. He rolled out and came up inside the shooter's range, his sword flashing once. The raider went down. The defenders noticed and rallied around them. Encouraged, they began pushing forward, using the cover Jaren had pointed out. A deep roar shook the air. From the far side of the square, a heavy raider transport rumbled forward on thick treads. Its mounted cannon began spitting bolts of energy into the defenders, tearing apart stalls and sending people diving for cover. Sarala cursed. "We can't fight that head-on." "We don't need to," Jaren said. "We just need to take out the gun." He spotted a narrow alley running behind the transport. "Come on!" They dashed into the alley, moving quickly but carefully. Raiders patrolled the path, but the tight space gave Jaren the advantage. One at a time, the armored soldiers fell to his blade or to Sarala's quick strikes. When they reached the back of the transport, Jaren climbed onto a stack of crates and leapt onto the rear platform. Sarala followed, her blades ready. The gunner was focused on the battle ahead and didn't notice them until it was too late. Sarala pulled him from the seat, and Jaren smashed the weapon's control console with his sword hilt. Sparks flew, and the cannon went silent. The defenders in the square cheered when they saw the transport's weapon disabled. With renewed courage, they surged forward, but victory was still far. More raiders were pouring into the city from the spaceport gates, using the chaos to loot warehouses and seize ships. Jaren and Sarala regrouped with the defenders. A tall dock worker with grease on his face ran up to them. "They've taken Dock 3. If they hold it, they can bring in reinforcements." Jaren looked at Sarala. She nodded. "Then we take it back." Dock 3 was a mess when they arrived. Cargo containers were overturned, and two small ships were already burning. Raiders had set up makeshift barricades, forcing the defenders to fight from a distance. Jaren's eyes flicked over the scene, noting the weak points. One barricade was near a tall crane holding a massive shipping crate. The crane's controls were unguarded. "I've got an idea," Jaren said. Sarala grinned. "You always do." While Sarala drew the raiders' attention with fast attacks, Jaren slipped toward the crane. He climbed the control tower, flipped the safety levers, and swung the huge crate directly over the barricade. With one sharp pull, he released it. The crate slammed into the barricade with a thunderous crash, scattering debris and raiders alike. The defenders charged in, seizing the opening. By sunset, Dock 3 was secure. The raiders were retreating toward their ships, but the city was still burning in several places. The defenders were exhausted, yet they had held the port. Sarala leaned on her swords, breathing hard. "You fight like someone who's been in 100 battles." Jaren shrugged. "I've been in enough to know it's not always about strength." She looked at him for a long moment, then said, "You've saved more lives today than most warriors do in a lifetime." Before Jaren could reply, a messenger ran up. "There's word from the council. They want you both at the command hall. Immediately." "The raiders aren't done." Jaren sheathed his sword. "Then neither are we." The command hall of Rygara 7 was built like a fortress. Thick metal walls, reinforced windows, and a wide circular table in the center. Around the table sat the city council, alien leaders from different clans, all looking tense. Jaren and Sarala entered together, still wearing dust and smoke from the day's battle. One of the council members, an older alien with silver skin and deep-set eyes, spoke first. "You've both done well to hold the port, but our scouts bring grim news. The raiders are regrouping outside the city. They are preparing one final strike." Sarala crossed her arms. "Where will they hit?" "Here," the council member said, pointing to the center of a city map. "The power core station. If they destroy it, the entire spaceport will lose energy. That means no shields, no communications, no defense systems." Jaren leaned over the map. "They'll come fast before we can repair anything." "They have a war leader," the silver-skinned alien continued. "A fighter named Varric. He commands through fear. If someone can defeat him, his forces may scatter." Sarala's eyes flicked to Jaren. "Sounds like a duel." Jaren gave a small smile. "I'm in." The plan was simple, at least on paper. Jaren and Sarala would lead, a small strike team to the outskirts where the raiders were gathering. While the defenders held the city walls, the two of them would find Varric and challenge him. By dusk, they were moving through the ruins beyond the port. Smoke drifted low over the cracked streets, and the only sounds were distant shouting and the clatter of weapons. They found the raider camp in the shadow of an old storage tower. Fires burned in metal barrels, and gray-armored soldiers gathered in loose groups, preparing for battle. In the center, on a raised platform, stood Varric. He was huge, with armor black as night and a great war axe slung across his back. His helmet was shaped like a snarling beast, and his presence made the surrounding raiders fall silent. Jaren stepped forward. "Varric!" The raider leader turned his head slowly. "A human?" His voice was deep, almost amused. "You think you can stop me?" "I think I can try," Jaren said evenly. The raiders formed a wide circle, sensing a duel. Sarala stayed at the edge, her hand on her sword, ready to intervene if things went wrong. Varric pulled his axe from his back, the weapon's head gleaming in the firelight. "Then come, human. Show me your courage." The fight began fast. Varric swung the axe in wide arcs, each strike powerful enough to break stone. Jaren moved lightly, dodging instead of blocking. He couldn't match Varric's strength. One wrong block would shatter his arms. The crowd of raiders shouted and jeered, betting on how quickly Jaren would fall. But as the minutes passed, their laughter began to fade. Jaren kept moving, never standing still. He waited for openings, striking only when he saw a gap in Varric's guard, small cuts to the armor joints, quick slashes at the legs. Varric growled, frustrated. "You run like a coward!" I move like someone who wants to win, Jaren replied. That only made the raider leader angrier. His swings grew wilder, his footwork sloppier. Jaren used that. When Varric lifted his axe high for an overhead strike, Jaren stepped in close, driving his shoulder into Varric's chest. The larger warrior stumbled back and Jaren's sword flashed, cutting across the side of the armor. The crowd roared, some in anger, others in shock. Varric roared and charged, trying to crush Jaren with sheer force. But Jaren sidestepped again, and this time he kicked the back of Varric's knee. The raider leader fell forward, catching himself with one hand. Before he could rise, Jaren's blade was at his throat. Yield! For a long moment, Varric's eyes burned with hatred. But then he dropped his axe and slowly raised his hands. The circle of raiders went silent. Sirala stepped forward, her voice carrying through the camp. Your leader has fallen. Leave Regera 7 or share his defeat. The raiders looked at each other. Without Varric's command, their unity crumbled. One by one, they began stepping back, then turning to leave. Jaren lowered his sword and stepped away from Varric. Go, he said quietly. Varric rose slowly, glaring at him. You fight. Well, human, better than I expected. Then he turned and walked into the night. By the time Jaren and Sirala returned to the city, the defenders were already celebrating. The raider threat had ended, not by a massive battle, but by one decisive duel. At the command hall, the council thanked them both. The silver-skinned leader spoke with a faint smile. Perhaps humans are not as fragile as we once believed. Sirala glanced at Jaren, her golden eyes amused. Fragile? No? Dangerous? Absolutely. Jaren chuckled softly. Dangerous enough, I hope. But even as the city celebrated, he knew the galaxy was a big place, and there would always be someone ready to underestimate humanity. If you like, I can now give you part 6, the final chapter, where the aftermath cements Jaren's and humanity's. The morning air in the Valley of Blades was cold and sharp. Mist curled low over the ground, clinging to the ruins of the old fortress where the final battle was about to take place. Rowan stood at the center, his boots planted firmly on the cracked stone floor. His sword hung loosely at his side, but his eyes were alert and unblinking. Across from him, Lady Salira tightened the straps on her armor. Her face was calm, but her hands moved quickly. She knew that today would decide everything, her honor, her people's survival, and whether Rowan would keep his promise to protect the valley. Around them, soldiers from both sides stood in a wide circle, weapons sheathed. The terms had been clear. No armies, no tricks. Just a duel between champions. Whoever won would control the valley. Whoever lost would leave forever. You've come a long way from the man I mocked, Salira said, adjusting her gauntlet. Her voice was steady, but there was a flicker of something else, respect, maybe, in her eyes. Rowan smirked faintly. And you've come a long way from the woman who thought my sword was just for show. The soldiers muttered at the remark, but no one stepped forward. This was not their fight. The signal came, a horn's low, mournful note. The duel began. Salira moved first, darting in with her curved blade flashing in the pale light. Rowan blocked. The clash of steel ringing out. She struck again and again, forcing him backward. Her attacks were fast, sharp, and precise. But Rowan had learned her style. He knew her rhythm, the half-second pause before she spun, the way her left foot always shifted before a high strike. He parried, stepped aside, and let her momentum work against her. You've been studying me, she said between swings. Study everything that can kill me, he replied. Their blades met again with a loud crash, the impact sending vibrations up their arms. They circled each other, boots scraping over the stone. The air was heavy with silence except for their breathing, and the faint clink of armor. Salira feinted low, then swung high. Rowan ducked under the arc, came up inside her guard, and pushed her back with the flat of his blade. She stumbled but caught herself quickly, smiling as if enjoying the challenge. Minutes passed like hours. The duel was evenly matched. Neither fighter giving ground for long. Sweat beaded on Rowan's forehead, but his breathing stayed steady. Salira's attacks grew more aggressive, almost desperate. Then it happened. She overreached. A lunge too far. Rowan sidestepped and hooked his foot behind hers, sending her stumbling forward. His blade rested lightly against her neck. The crowd gasped, but Rowan didn't press further. "You yield?" he asked. Salira froze, her breath quick. For a moment, it looked like she might keep fighting, but then she lowered her sword and stepped back. "I yield," she said quietly. The soldiers on her side looked stunned. Some seemed ready to argue, but Salira raised her hand for silence. She walked toward Rowan, her armor clinking softly. "You could have killed me?" she said. "Yes," Rowan replied simply. "Why didn't you?" He glanced toward the soldiers, then back to her. "Because this wasn't about killing. It was about proving who was stronger. I've proved it." She stared at him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "You have my respect, Rowan. And my promise. The valley is yours." The two warriors clasped forearms in the old gesture of honor. The tension in the air eased and the crowd began to disperse. Later, as the sun broke through the mist, Rowan stood on a high wall looking over. The valley, it was quiet now. The only sound the distant rush of the river. He felt the weight of what he had won, not just land, but peace. For now. Salira joined him, no longer in armor, her sword at her hip. "So," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I guess the bulge between your legs was bigger than your sword after all." Rowan turned to her, raising an eyebrow. "Careful. I might ask for a rematch just to prove it again." She laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. "Next time, I'll win." "Next time," he said, "you won't."